So welcome friends, happy June solstice, happy International Yoga Day 2021. It's also Monday, which in the Indic tradition is celebrated as the day to Shiva, the divine masculine, the representation of the consciousness from which Shakti, the creative impulse, flows. Yesterday was Father's Day, and we are also honoring, therefore, not just the divine feminine principle in our call today, but also the divine masculine, and both of which are needed for yoga. And with that preamble, I am Nilima Bhat, the co-author of the book Shakti Leadership and the co-convener of the Truth and Reconciliation movement that works at Truth and Reconciliation from the inside out. And we have as our guest today our dear friend and esteemed author and scholar, Dr. Neela Bhattacharya Saxena. She's the author of two excellent books that speak to today's topic. Uh, Her first book was called In the Beginning is Desire, and her second book is The Absent Mother God of the West. And today being International Yoga Day, I was sensing into what is the aspect of yoga that we can talk about today that perhaps is not going to be covered very much, in all the good stuff that's going on. And I wanted us to go as deep as we can into the human psyche, because if you understand, yoga is essentially unifying that which is otherwise split. Then let's go to the very ground of the human psyche and say, how can we achieve truth and reconciliation at the level of the psyche? What is it that is split there that needs to be put back together and made whole? And so we're going to look at yoga in that way. My own tradition and background in yoga, I'm a Shivananda yoga teacher. And Swami Shivananda of the Divine Life Society, Rishikesh. And he has a beautiful saying in his works. He says, eating, sleeping, drinking, a little laughter, much weeping. Is that all? Don't die here like a worm. Wake up, attain immortal bliss. So I invoke my first guru, Swami Shivananda, to come and bless us on this call today. And I also invoke the gurus he then brought me to, that is Sri Aurobindo and the mother, the founders of the integral yoga. And I'm wearing my yoga t-shirt today, which says, man is a transitional being. It's one of Sri Aurobindo's statements that man or humanity is not the pinnacle of evolution. There's much more to go that we have to evolve to, which is why we need to do yoga. And according to Sri Aurobindo's definition of yoga, says any methodized approach to self-perfection, right? So self-perfection is defined as harmonizing all the different planes and parts of our being and gathering them into an integral whole. So again, we are back to saying, what are these different parts of self? And at a minimum, the primal ground is the duality of Shiva and Shakti, the masculine in us and the feminine in us. And Sri Aurobindo went on to say, ultimately, all life is yoga, that everything we are doing, eating, sleeping, drinking, is an opportunity to turn it into a yoga, by remembering and offering to that divine principle in us, and then letting that take it over and perfect it. So with that, over to you, Neela. I think everyone's joined us because they are completely intrigued by the topic, yoga and the primal trauma of separation and understanding misogyny, gynophobia and the mother wound, and therefore also misandry, androphobia, and the father wound. So over to you.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much, Nilima. Really sincerely appreciate the opportunity to share. I like the coming of a child into this beautiful mother child, father child too. Yesterday was Father's Day. I got to be with my husband, and I went to see my son who is in Boston with our older son. We had a wonderful Father's Day celebration. So yes, there are a lot of these wounds or the perception of wounds. And since perception is reality, we have to tackle it. Otherwise, we keep self destructing. So, since I'm a professor, I like to do some PowerPoints to organize my thoughts. Also, like to show pictures. So, the 15 minutes that I have, I will show you those and then pick up whatever you want to because it's a vast subject. And then we can have a dialogue about that. Okay, so can I share my screen then?
Yes.
Okay, right. Okay, so, all right, so here we go. So, um, yoga and the primal trauma of separation. Nilima gave this subject, and I like this very much. Um, and the image, of course, is this solstice from a very ancient traditions of balancing. We lost that. And why we lost that, that too has a history. So let me just first talk about this term called mother wound. There is both ordinary and cosmic. Now I'm separating these so we don't mix them up. So this trauma of separation must be acknowledged. Um, and by acknowledging that, I mean recognizing the first noble truth, which is dukkha. Now, the problem, of course, is that dukkha people think, oh, it means life is suffering and misery. No, that's not what it is. Until and unless we recognize that there is a disconnect, there is this discontent, we cannot really, really come to unity. So, what happened actually in the history is this rise of what I'm calling a spiritual patriarchy, both East and West, which led to a sort of unity without diversity. That's one way of understanding. We can think of it as Advaita, where life is Maya. I mean, I'm giving a simplistic thing because most people think that way. Or monotheism, there's only one God, no other God is allowed, and then it leads to oppression. And in the process, the denial of the mother happened. So this gynophobia, if we talk in terms of the Indic sense, there's the fear of the gunas of Prakriti. You can see the root word guna, right? Gyni, guna, gune, the feminine. So these the gunas of Prakriti. Even when we talk a lot about sattva guna, we want to deny, say, tamas, that it is bad, or rajas. So, but actually, it is we have to balance all three. So I'm just throwing these things out, because there are a lot of stuff. So that happens. And then, in reaction to extreme monotheism of the Western world, we have its complete opposite, which is the rise of scientific mechanistic atheism. So what happens, it says, okay, there is nothing, it's nothing but pure stuffism. I don't even call it materialism, it is stuffism. So what happens as a result of that, that too denies the vitality, the energy, the beauty of the cosmos and its unity, because it also creates a kind of a foundational atomism, means everything is fragmented. So now, since we talk about the mother wound in terms of maternal trauma, which turns to what we call stone mother, the woman mother who is unable to be there for the child, and that may be for different reasons. It can be individual trauma that the woman experienced. It could be coming out of the cosmic disconnect, which happens a lot, by the way, in the Western world. And I'm very, very happy to listen to a scholar and Dr. Gabor Mate, who talks a lot about this trauma. So I'm not going to go too much into it. We can have this conversation during our dialogue. But what is this forgetting of the Divine Mother? as the self-consciousness rises, even in a child, the separation from the mother happens very naturally, that you are an individual. You are somebody separate from the mother. And it's vital for our growth, right? You can see it in the story of the fall, but we have to return to the garden. Otherwise, we remain separate and we remain in trauma. And I'm just referring to two books that have done some amazing job in understanding our brain, understanding of self-consciousness. One is called The Master and His Emissary, The Divided Brain and the Making of the Modern World. An amazing work by a scientist, a doctor, and also, who has a history of humanities, part of his training. And the other is called Alphabet versus the Goddess, Conflict Between Word and Image. So that happened as a result of excessive importance given to the word, and we lost the power of the image, which is, of course, has returned. That's why I like to connect images with words. So, that's why this particular medium is helpful. So these are just an overall understanding of it. But let's just see what happens as a result of that. So the misogyny and misandry are two sides of the same coin. It's two sides of the two kind. So what is this father wound? This is this power over. Whenever we think we have too much power, which actually frightens us, when we don't feel terribly powerful, and this comes out on this excessive power over others, over children, over women or men, depending on whoever is feeling that. And because of that fear, there is this escape from emotion, right? Because that fear creates anger. And then you are so scared that you want to escape from that emotion. And it can happen to men in a way. Of course, they are allowed to express anger, right? But that's a very powerful emotion. So what do? Then you hide. So this father wound is called, again, absent father, emotionally absent, physically absent, or just not there, right? And then this escaping into a kind of splendid isolation. You remain bound within yourself because you are afraid of emotions. So it is a reaction to the mother wound in many ways. And men and women respond to these things differently, completely based on their individual history. Now, how women react to patriarchy, right? When they're reacting against patriarchy, it could lead to misandry on the one hand, or it is tremendous love for that patriarchal power, which they think they do not have, right? So this leads to a kind of patriarchal feminism. But actually, they're all both escape into mind away from perishable and impermanent body, right? It's all a kind of, even in religion, right? It is the body that becomes the site of everything terrible, right? So now let me talk a little bit about how my own journey happened. So it's like this mother lover who comes to the West. And I call it my gender trouble to expressing my truth. So think about the original sin, right? The original sin, so deeply ingrained in the psyche of those who accept that, it also takes you to this other extreme of sexuality itself as female power, right? But it is a degraded aspect of it. And then, as I said, this other aspect is this extreme patriarchal feminism, which is male power worship. Now, I just came across this book, which I haven't read yet, but it is the, worshipping of power. Now, I am not the only one. There are many, many different people who come here who take their mother God for granted, and then they see things that kind of perplexes them. So I recommend you to look at Drukmogyal Dakini, this amazing Tibetan master woman. She gave this TED talk where she says, I never imagined hatred and disharmony between mother and child until I came to the West. So it is a very telling thing. What aspect of this disconnect has affected people? And right now we cannot call where the West, ends and East begins, because we live in a globalized world. Now, for me, I'm also experiencing, of course, I took my Kali for granted, and here I am trying to teach, English, and people aren't looking at me as an English teacher. They're seeing some, third world, poor third world woman who needs to be rescued by the West, right? And here is this image of God in the mind of the people that, they're part of my family. I have lived here for almost 35 years now. But this is the spiritual patriarchy of monotheism. But closer I started to look at these things, if you look at this picture, God is not alone in this very famous picture, being held by a feminine figure, which is Shakina. But these are the things, the adventures that I had as I began to question and try to understand the reaction of people in the Western world, in the United States especially. So as a result of, I won't go into all the details, I ended up writing my first book. It's called In the Beginning is Desire, and how Tantra uses primal desire. So instead of this kind of debased sexuality, what is this understanding of something which is divine about sexuality? So this text, Desire, came upon that one in the beginning, which is from the Rig Veda. So I kind of engage, and this book was in a way, my effort to return to my roots and tell people, this is who I am. But in the process, though, a kind of dissolution happens. I had many other experiences that, of course, was a whole other story. But that's what I wrote first. And then I started to talk about Kali. Kali as Kamakhya, one whose name is desire. But Kali means you face the ultimate terror and you ultimate Ananda. Both are part of the same thing. All of these aspects that I experienced myself, I called her pregnant nothingness. I wrote that once her devotee is devoured by Kali, she has nothing to fear. Because people told me, oh, Kali is this devouring mother, using all kinds of psychoanalytic language. But my experience, which was induced by my family's Guru Siddhama, I didn't know that. And I talk about how duality in non-duality, this is the Shakta understanding, the Shakti aspect of it. So I talked about, and it's very, very difficult. So Shiva remains Shava without the mark of Kali, the E, they're all mystical, linguistic mysticism. All of these things I started to slowly articulate. Now there are years and years behind this. So, but in my classrooms, I began to talk to people. How do I talk about these complex things? In terms of how we organize difference. Now you can see, I don't know if you can see because the top is kind of slightly, let me move this out of here. So what I noticed that how difference is vertically organized. So everything good, male, spirit, mind, light, soul, white, father, heaven, anything you want to put it, good, west. And you can make the same thing, Purusha, up there, and Prakriti below, if you want to use the Indic language, female, flesh, matter, darkness, body, including Mother Earth, hell, they're all below, right? So this is where you can see this kind of seeds of all these tyrannical things. But look at this image. Now, I use this particular organization because people are more familiar with the yin yang, which is an intermingling and interpenetrating dualities. So remember when I said that unity without diversity, right? And then there is, of course, extreme separation, which is dualism, but I call it dancing dualities. How do we create that dancing duality? And in order to get to that, I started to wonder about what happened to the Divine Mother in the Western world. Is Kali just merely an imagined deity of India? She must reveal herself. So that's what led to my second book, which is called Absent Mother God of the West. And that's where I began to discover some amazing things. This is a book that actually shocked me. It was called Longing for Darkness, Tara and the Black Madonna. So my book is actually in response to China Galland's book. I was so deeply touched by her longing, and this is a line from my book, her hunger for a mother god, and her journeys left a deep impression. Could having a black mother god in the psyche bestow a different kind of privilege? So think about it. If there is this mother wound somewhere, the mother is not there. For an ordinary mother, the great mother is not there. For ordinary father, the great mother is not there, right? And then there is this sense of loss. And here I am, I have this black female. Remember, in the United States, the figure of the black female is at the very bottom of the hierarchical ladder, right? And here I am, for me, the most powerful image is a black female, nude black female. So I began to articulate this and I began to understand what yoga really is. Um, because while I'm doing all this crazy life, raising children, trying to figure things out, yoga began to literally explode, right? Yoga as asana, yoga as this incredible power, because people understand that there is something amiss here and how to. So, yoga is actually return to the body, return to the source that was denied for such a long time. So it is something that you're moving from that mind, from escaping into the mind, into bringing yourself into the body. But for me, yoga is a very wide world. All of you know who practice. Hatha yoga is just the beginning stage. You have many different yogas, and But for me, yoga is pratyabhigya. Pratyabhigya comes from the Kashmir Shaiva tradition, recollection, remembering, putting those fragments together. That's what yoga ultimately does. And this marvelous text of Kashmir Shaivism, which you can study, and there are many masters teaching these things. So I began to speak about these things in many different disguised language in my classes. So let me see. And I had to introduce people who were talking about, say, desire in a different language, in a different way. So here is Vimala Thakkar. I don't know, some of you may know about her, who talks about the whole life as divinity. All right. Not just that, she also talks about, uh, I'm just going to read this, the real existential joy, which is your nature, which is the nature of intelligence, the true love and compassion are the perfume of that ultimate reality. And she too, like Aurobindo, talks about whole life as yoga. But then something fascinating happens when you read deeper into her work. She says, in the absolute ground of existence, there seems to be this primal energy of desire. See what is happening to ordinary sexuality or ordinary sexual revolution, which was vital for the Western world to have, because it was reacting against that original sin idea, right? But she says, which has no motivation, which has no direction, no destination. It is there inexhaustible, infinite, beyond the mind, beyond the center of the me and I. There is fountain of primal energy. Now, think about this primal energy, right? But this energy also expresses itself in many different ways. As sex, greed, and anger. These are called three vishas, three malas, many different. But that is the very source where we can find this amazing liberating wisdom. And I talk about these women figures because the feminine inhabited by the woman's body is also denied. Now, woman is the secret ingredient of Tantra. This is the story of Yashosogyal from Vajrayana Buddhism, because I'm a practitioner of Vajrayana Buddhism, and Kaula, Shaktapats, they're all actually same. The practices are same. But what it does, it tells us that human body is the basis of the accomplishment of wisdom. And the gross bodies of men and women are equally suited, but if a woman has strong aspiration, she has higher potential. This is coming from Padma Sambhava. So we can do this, we can create this yoga, and there are many different kinds of yoga. So this one is a Kaula path, praxis of Vijnana Bhairava Tantra, and it connects the shunya, the void, with our everyday life. You experience this absolute nirvana thing, which is the void going into the womb of the mother, and then you come and you kind of literally express yourself as a tree. You express yourself as maybe an artist. You use these various yogic methods like yantra, which is a kind of a calculus. Now I'm giving you a quote from Gayatri Chakravarti Spivak, a very important scholar. People do not know that she also writes about Kali, very little, but she does. The how yantra is a calculus, it's a diagrammatical representation of the body. But we know that those of you who are here, how yoga works, so I won't go too much into it. But these are the different kind of practices. This is a Tara mandala. These are the praxis mandala making. These are drawing. I'm putting quotes around Hindu and Buddhist because these are all complicated terms as the word yoga right now. So here there is a Tara mandala. You can see the sky element which is encircling. In the middle, you can see the Star of David, right? Or Shiva, Shakti, and Yam intertwined together. And you can see that practically anywhere in the world. Now, here I just want to, just before I finish, I want to refer to so many young people right now are actually creating amazing art. There are many amazing teachers who are talking about these. So this is Tri Shakti by Arghya Dipta, also amazing teacher. He has a PhD in Tantra. I learn a lot from him, but he's also an amazing artist. And there are many teachers because this path is only accessible through teachers. Lama Lina, she's a marvelous teacher of Tibetan Buddhism. Harish Christopher Wallace, Nilima, you know about Sthaneshwar Timalsina. These are scholars and practitioners. Raja Chaudhary speaks about it. Ananta Shri in India is absolutely marvelous. Shriyam, many of you know about. And there are many, many. I'm referring to some scholars also. Daniel O'Dear, who talks about this amazing Nataraja dance meditation he teaches. He also understands the connection between Kashmir Shaiva tradition, the yoga tradition of Kashmir Shaivism, and Tibetan Buddhism. Ian Baker is an amazing Tibetan, again, practitioner of this tradition. Now, what is all this about? Getting to the mother, where both the Shakti and the Shiva, the masculine and the feminine, are intertwined. They dance together. They do not erase each other. They come in and out of each other. So the central image is the spider web, the medicine wheel of the native people, Kala Chakra. You can see these in all of these mandala in the ever expanding universe. And then the central dot of Shiva. You can see this pulsation. This is what is called spanda, right? Moving in and out of each other. So Shriyanta expanding each one of us non-existing, non-acting actors, eternally playing Mahamaya's game. I call it this because it's very difficult until you practice and until you experience this, that there is this nothing but this primal pulsation of life, and that is inhabited by the Great Mother. Because the Great Mother is actually beyond both the masculine and the feminine, because she is the void. That's what I'm calling her, the uh, calling her pregnant nothingness, right? Okay, so that's pretty much is the end of my thing. Let me see. I will stop sharing here. I probably gave, as always, a kind of quick outline of a lot of stuff that I have done, but I'm looking forward to having a dialogue. So
Yes.
here I am.
So first, let's just take a nice deep breath and absorb what you shared. It was so profound. And like most things that are mythic, we sense a deeper truth even if we don't understand the cognitive material, right?
Right.
So let me just try and anchor it back into some of the central questions I have come with, and I imagine some of the women have come with, which is we all understand, and there's a huge research business case, SDG 5 recognizes that unless you empower women and girls, um, we're not going to really get to our sustainable goals. And so I think at this time in human history, everyone, at least cognitively, understands that raising women up and giving equality to women is a necessary thing. It's a morally right thing to do. And it's also good for all of us. I think
Yes.
you kind of cognitively get that. But subcognitively, there seems to be this, what we are calling misogyny, right? We're calling it gynophobia. I mean, the best of men, the most enlightened of them, the most thoughtful and reasoning of them, they don't get the feminine. They simply don't see it. And to the extent that they would rather use different language, it's like saying, here is a rose. but they're choosing to call it a sunflower or a jasmine or anything but call it a
Right.
rose. What is that?
Ah, okay. So, what has happened as a result of this extreme self consciousness? By self consciousness, I mean a separate entity where the male child, now see, think about in the upbringing, the male child, in order to join the patriarchal world, has to separate from the mother, right? There are many traditions in the ancient world where rituals were created for the child all over the world. But until we come to scientific atheistic mechanical, this idea, or extreme monotheism where the female is completely removed from the divine space, right, there was a kind of balance. You didn't have to deny the mother in order to participate in the male world, but these two actually are denying the mother, denying the feminine. That either, and why are they denying? Because she, think about the language, she's the womb, but she's also the tomb, right? This whole self-consciousness separates life from death. Okay, but life actually includes both birth and death. Life is this incredible flowering, or incredible, this pulsating universe where life and death come in and out, the yin and yang, right? All the opposites are actually polarity. You can't have one without the other. But what has happened as a result of this and this escape into the mechanic? Think about what we have done, created incredibly powerful machines, right? But most of them are destructive machines. Great machines. We are using a machine right now. I believe me, I love my machines, but only as a tool. But the feminine, because it is this pervasive, engulfing thing, you have to be ready to be engulfed by the feminine. The feminine is not some nice, that's why people will give a lot of lip service to gentle mothers, and but the fierce mother, the mother is not some goody two shoe, oh, we have to recognize the fierce mother. And that is very scary. That is a very powerful thing. So that's one reason. The other reason is you cannot have patriarchal power, separate power over, without suppressing the feminine inside you, right? So the men have to really and that leads to think about the horror that men experience, right? Disconnection from the experience, heart attack. They die faster. They have so many other ailments in order to bolster this power, right? But at the same time, power is power is a very addictive thing, right? So as soon as you acknowledge the feminine, you have to recognize that she's in us, she's in you. You have to pay her respect. You have to acknowledge deep vulnerability. And this system that we have created collectively, by the way, doesn't allow that, because it'll just literally dismantle.
And so, misogyny.
Yeah.
Talk about that.
Okay. So there is a spectrum, friends. At the probably mildest flavor is androcentrism, centered on the male perspective. Quite valid, right? Ordinary male perspective, because we grow up as males and female, and the spectrum within. After all, we know nobody is just male or female, and of course, different kinds of different kind of gender, third gender, fourth gender, that's a different thing, but we're talking in terms of understanding of this duality. So androcentrism in the male perspective, women can have it too. Okay, then we come to sexism. Sexism is like, okay, division of labor, this is female work, this is male work. That's how most of the world originally kind of operated, because of division of labor and stuff like that. But then it gets fossilized, right? That men can do only this thing, female can. And that's why feminist movement kind of shows that, hey, that just doesn't work. So you can look at these terms: androcentrism, sexism, then you can look at gynophobia. right? Gynophobia is that fear that I was telling you about. Misogyny is probably the most extreme aspect, literally loathing and repulsion. Okay, it's like the fear has become so, then it is pathological, right? In the spectrum, you can put different people within the spectrum here. So if there is misogyny, that is life denial of the worst kind. And then there is this abysmal loathing of everything, and that you can feminize people, right? You can feminize groups of men, you can feminize the earth, you can feminize, and then you want to control it. Remember that hierarchically organized, dualism. And that is what misogyny. And then that misogyny will create another reaction, right? That misogyny complete, when women face that, and when they have not digested their own emotion and they are not doing the yoga, right, then they react, and then the misandry happens. I see this in the Western world all the time, and I couldn't figure this out. Why is this absolute? But this is the one extreme moving to the other extreme, right? So for androphobia, or you want to become men, your idea of power is just this power over. And women have done amazingly well, actually, because this system allows yang. You can develop your yang power. And we have all done that in order to survive. Uh, but then you realize if you're denying the yin in you, whether male or female, then you lose touch with life. But it's very real. And what yoga does, it brings it on the surface. Yoga is pratyabhigya. When you see it, then it dissolves. But then if you don't do it, or if you do not even know, most of us are unconscious, right? Not aware of the energies that animate us.
It's so interesting. We talk about, in the hero's journey, the three great journeys we have to make to wholeness. The first is integrating the ego and the shadow. And the second is to integrate the anima, the animus in the psyche. And then the third is to integrate the human and the divine, right? And I find most people are comfortable doing shadow work. So there is ego shadow work, then they do the human divine work. But this middle piece is still getting left out, right? Integrating the anima, animus. And we are back to that mother wound and, gynophobia and misogyny, right? It feels like
Right,
everyone wants to jump from level 1 to level 3 without doing the level 2 work.
right, right. That's spiritual bypassing, right? The terminology that is used is
Yeah.
spiritual bypassing. It's so easy. Oh, I'm all divine, I'm Brahman, this and that. But hey, you haven't integrated. So this is where the chakra thing, like, oh, those are the idea of lower and higher chakras are also hierarchical, right? It's not
Yes.
a lower or higher chakra. If you have not integrated, and it's like a coming and going, right? You have to balance. By the way, the trouble with the hero's journey image, hero's journey, I also teach a mythology course. I just taught that last semester. It's a very important journey for males, teenagers, right? And when some of you know this, that say the stories about the hero's journey in mythic tales, where the boy, actually has to go face all these difficulties, and then there is the imprisoned feminine, right? Women react, oh, she's this object sitting inside the castle. It's actually not about women at all. It's about the male who has to go and unlock the feminine within for
Yeah.
him to become a man,
Yeah. The
right?
anima.
Right. But see, the anima in Jungian terms, it also becomes negative, as you know, right? Or animus in the female. When it is not seen what that is, then it becomes this pathological thing. So when you unlock the feminine, then you have healed the mother wound.
Yes.
But this unlocking thing gets lost. It's like the female is seen as the prize, right? So the hero's journey goes and, oh, this is my prize. And the woman feels, oh, am I just a sleeping beauty? Am I just this, who needs to be rest, damsel in distress, But we digest this stuff also.
I think
What?
more than the prize, she is the medicine he needs, right, to heal himself. That's a better way to understand it,
Right,
right? And that would be the elixir, which would therefore give you that gift of wholeness and immortality.
right.
So with that, let me open it up to, we have some wonderful women on the call. So this is a Shakti dialogue for all of us. I'm very happy to get questions. Go ahead and raise your hand either physically or on the screen. And any questions for Neela, comments, clarifications? Shaku.
Thank you, Nilima, for bringing Neela to talk to us. My goodness, Neela, that was just riveting. Um, so much. I was just taking notes. You spoke about splendid isolation.
Yeah.
Can you go deeper into that? Because with COVID, we were forced into that splendid isolation. But at the same time, now there is a reluctance to come out of it. That is just in terms of the linear time, but
Mhm.
also the splendid isolation that one really wants to stay in is how, and the part two to that is, how is that connected with spiritual bypassing? Because isolation is somehow in the spiritual community seen as glamorous, and retreat is, I mean, everyone's doing retreats, right? So I would love to hear more about
Wow. You sure picked one of the. Okay. So, COVID, I actually wrote an article and said COVID is an avatar. COVID is here. I published that in American Kahani a little while ago, but the churning of the thing. So this isolation was basically to go within. It was the avatar telling us to go within, go inside your. It's like mother saying, "Hey, you have been misbehaving. Time out. Go inside." And we had to. We all, those who did, and a lot of people discovered stuff. But I will differentiate that from splendid isolation. Why I use it's a song too, right? Splendid isolation. But by what I mean by splendid isolation is this Purusha. I'm going to use the Indian language here. Purusha, this is one kind of yoga. Patanjali yoga does that, by the way. Tantra yoga doesn't, which separates Purusha from Prakriti. Okay, because Prakriti is this whirling, dancing, crazy thing. Purusha just has to see the Prakriti, and then Prakriti stops dancing, and Purusha sits there in splendid isolation. And you can see that in the Greek tradition also, Aristotle's, the Nicomachean, all kinds of texts where the sage sits up in the mountain in absolute peace, called Kaivalya, okay, Kevala, onlyness. That means you have actually reached a very high stage of development where Atman and Brahman is one. You are connecting with this expansive Brahman, right? Your expansive self, great sense of this. I am Brahman, right? Aham Brahmasmi, Mahavakyas and all that. These are all about splendid isolation. All right. But this is called the exit path. I call it exit path, nigama, escape from life. Okay, run away from life. It's just messy. It creates all this thing. And great yoga can give you a tremendous control over sex, greed, and anger. You have to have control, right? In the beginning, yama niyamas are very important. But if you get stuck there, up there in the top of the mountain, and you never come down, then you live in the splendid isolation. No problem with that. If you just sit there and not bother anybody and not pontificate, unfortunately, a whole bunch of so-called gurus are pontificating from the splendid isolation. They're also denying the woman, right? Denying the feminine, saying control, sit there in splendid isolation. Oh, fantastic. But what about this world? But agama, avatar means avatarana. You are returning, you're descending from the mountain. You've experienced, again, depending on many different traditions will tell you all kinds of stuff. The Shakta, the Tantric, the Buddhists, they say there is beyond Brahman because the Purusha gets engulfed by Mahakali. Kali actually engulfs even that awakened self. You are completely gone. You have in samadhi, you do not know who's saying I am here. I mean, great masters have spoken about that. Who is going to say? As soon as you say I am, you have already created duality, right? You can't have life without duality. Even when you're sitting there in isolation, oh, I am. I am. Who are you talking? Who? So there is this understanding. So when you're returning, then you have to integrate. This is Mahayana dictum. Samsara is nirvana, right? So you're not escaping into nirvana, but you're realizing that you can't have one without the other. So here these traditions talk about Advaya, not Advaita, where Shunya, the experience of the void, creates that balance. And then you begin to descend. The great masters, the greatest of them, that's the Buddha field, very high. I mean, even reaching to that point is very high, and tremendously powerful masters are doing that. But the feminine, what people think is Vamachara, way of the woman, which is horrible, antinomian. No, there's tremendous misunderstanding about all that. It is simply about returning to the ordinary world until you have reached the very bottom, Sahaja, where the sky and the earth have come together in green Tara, image of the green Tara or Matangi, the amazing things. So this is the understanding. COVID, I think, is mother sending us to a different kinds of isolation because you got stuck to stuffism, right? With this sticky connection with this whole stuffy world, which the scientific, atheistic, mechanical world, all that created, right? Extreme thing. So it's asked us to withdraw inside us, to unlock the feminine inside. Hopefully, it has worked at least for some people. But thank you for asking this very pertinent question, Shaku.
Thanks. That was a beautiful, beautiful entry to where, I want to go with the concept of the wound as a portal. So if anyone has another question before we go there, because I'm trying to make sure we don't leave you opened up. We also want to, close this and take this so-called trauma to transformation and blessing. So go ahead, Shinjini.
Sinjini?
Yeah, hi, thank you. That has been quite interesting. I had read, as you know, when I was much younger, I read this book by Swami Nigurananda. If you have come across it, Dev Devi Shushant, yeah, which is about the anatomy of Kali, and it brings into the questions of quantum physics, essentially the anatomy of Kali and the four, arms and the hanging tongue, plus also Shiva, like the power cut is like I'll just switch off this video. Okay. So it brings in, yeah, now it's back. It's somehow, flip-flopping. So there were some very interesting ideas. I mean, to be very, as I was thinking of this question, I also must admit that I haven't really reconciled those readings with my more recent spiritual understanding, which is more around Buddhism and, the other scripts, which are obviously, Vedanta, etc. But standalone, that book had a very interesting take on the four forces, like the gravitational force, and like it actually had, the universe depicted through the anatomy of Kali and Shiv, and Shiv was actually, interpreted as the black hole. The life has left, and therefore it is white, and that entire spurious movement, and there was quite some interesting insights on that. But of course, no gender politics involved in that book, at least. So would you want to just, do you think these two philosophies reconcile, or is it more of a different way of thinking about Kali?
No, they do. They do. See, we have to translate terms. Kali comes from Kala, right? Time. One who devours time is Kali. And of course, there are many different Kalis. The Laya Samadhis. So you're absolutely right. Now, the Shiva actually is the realizer. All of us are potentially Shivas. Okay. It has no gender. Unfortunately, it's given the male thing, right? Because long story, there won't be enough time. But think about it. In the image of Kali, which is actually a dynamic samadhi, Shava becomes Shiva, right? Shava is completely dead. That means you have totally surrendered yourself. And as soon as Kali dances, then this union happens. Dynamic samadhi, that means that you are in the world, but your inside is completely quiet. Now, when you think about the big crunch and the big bang, right? Going into the black hole, which is Krishna, by the way, the word Krishna means one who draws you into the black hole, okay? And the white is the Radha expression. This is coming down story, okay? Many, many different ways of understanding. Kala Chakra Tantra actually does that, okay? Now, Buddhism, if you look at early Buddhism, which is Theravada, which is simply Yama Niyama, that's aspect. Then you go to Mahayana, then you go to Vajrayana, which is Tantric Buddhism. Tantric Buddhism is very different from early Buddhism, but they're all stages. Everybody has to go through them. It's not like you can jump to, like you kindergarten to PhD. You are asking some questions that are PhD level in the sense that you have to understand how quantum science has actually demolished. And for the first time, real science is coming very close to inner understanding of what these terminologies mean, right? So Shiva as Prakasha, light. So we have been so addicted to this thing called light that we have run away from what we see, darkness. This is the feminine, right? So in the composite image of Kali, and there are many Kalis, don't forget that, right? So ordinary Kali, Dakshina Kali, Vama Kali, then you have Nitya Kali, you have Shmashan Kali, which is like Nairatma, where the self is completely engrossed. So since I'm not familiar with this particular text, but absolutely, the iconography of Kali, if you have 4 hands, it has one meaning. If you have 10 hands, is another meaning, okay? The tongue, the Rajas, Sattva, Tamas, the white, red, there are colored symbolism. Hands are your karma heads that are cut off, right? What she's wearing, these are actually alphabets. People think these are ego heads. These are actually alphabets of the Sanskrit language. So the iconography is extremely sophisticated. And until unless you practice them, these won't make any sense. So I would recommend that, yes, you read them. This is the moment of reconciling. If we don't do this collectively, then we are on the path of self-destruction, or this extreme mechanical, AI driven, some fake, maybe we have to leave like Interstellar, right? You have to leave the earth, we have destroyed it, and we're going to go somewhere else, and we're going to destroy that too, right? But yes, if you're reading these texts, do some practice and recognize what Kali and Shiva really are, not just some entities out there that need to be worshipped. Worshipping is good, you start there, right? But then you have to go deeper within yourself.
Thank you.
So,
And also, do you agree with the words feminism and masculine, like the way we popularly use? Because every time we say that each one of us have both, and we say feminism, masculinism in a way of female and male, I feel that we understand what you mean, or how we use it, but in a way it gets entangled in the politics. I feel that in modern day we should perhaps, I don't know, recoin those terms so that we accept without having a repulsion. There would be a repulsion towards the fact that a male being identified as feminine versus woman trying to masculinize herself to fit the economy of the world. So do you think that those terms are perhaps a little an odd fit?
Well, I use the term gynocentric with a capital G to create the Shakta understanding. But feminism is a very important movement. Never underestimate the feminist power. We wouldn't be talking here. We won't have our degrees or our jobs.
No,
So the
no,
political...
I am a feminist. I'm saying femininity, like feminine.
No. I'm actually reclaiming the word feminine. Okay. Because it has been so devalued. I'm reclaiming Prakriti. I'm reclaiming mother, the body. Vital that we use the term feminine. I have had my whole life, My feminist friends, first they thought I was not a feminist, and they kept saying, "Oh, feminine," because they have this understanding of feminine as something, oh, wilting. I am this. I'm gonna kind of faint. I need the smelling salt. And think about Sojourner Truth. Ain't I a woman? Woman is not some feminine. The word itself has been devalued to denote something weak, something that is, and we don't even understand what is weak, right? If you go to yin, it is the weakest that's the strongest, the water
Vulnerability,
element,
for example. Yeah.
right? So vital that we understand the terms, we reclaim them, like the black power, right? Negro, we call it negritude, that you reclaim these, something that has been devalued by people. They have been devalued because of that fear, right? Because of that need to consolidate power. But you have to be careful, you have to be vigilant.
Thank you.
That was beautifully responded to, Neela. My way of answering that question is, if we start giving up on words, we'll be left with no vocabulary eventually. We have to actually understand what is the reason that denies the word. And we have
Yeah.
to address that rather
Yeah.
than give up on the word. Because if we haven't addressed the original underlying issue, they will have problems with the next word we come up with, right? So
Absolutely.
it'll just get passed on from one thing to the next. Weepka?
Yeah, now that you speak about words, it's so funny. In German you have the masculine and the feminine ending. So you say Chancellor and Chancellorette, so to speak, Kanzler and Kanzlerin. And now there's talking about the power of word and of devaluing the feminine. So what is happening here is now, instead of initially it was insisted that you always have to use both words. So take a different one, policeman and policewoman. So you always had to say policemen and policewomen, policewomen, policemen. And now they come up with a way of writing and even speaking to use both. So you have something like a police man, and you put like a star when you write it, just to denote both genders. And in speaking, you do a little pause so that you denote both genders, which is different to what you were saying when you say I reclaim the value. They're trying to change the way we speak in order to change preconcepts in a view of being equal. And with equality, in a way, you lose the polarity. We are to be equally respected, but we're not the same. A woman is different from man.
Right.
And it
right.
is a quality to cherish, not something to annihilate and make same. And I think, at least in Germany, we're losing that part.
Yeah.
This is that subtle thing, right? That we want equality, but we forget to value diversity. And then we go to diversity, but we can't hold the equality.
Right.
And then the diversity becomes a polarity with one above and one below. Right?
Because it's always one above and one below. And even now, this goes maybe in a different direction. Even if you think about a woman's work as being devalued, well, guess what? During the pandemic, who held the society up? The caregivers, the mothers, and those who looked after the sick people. And again, I find, at least over here in Germany, a devaluation. It's like the pandemic threw women back at the hearth, instead of valuing it and saying the pandemic shows us how much we need our caretakers. It's a very weird time right now. I think we're a lot of devaluing narratives still abound.
Right.
And so we're kind of past time, but I have to take this to its positive meaning making for our own evolution, that how could we use this wounding or this devaluing? How could that become actually the portal to the return to wholeness and empowerment, right? For both men and women. Could you speak to that, Neela?
Right. Since Aparna put in this thing, what is mother wound? If you have never experienced it, you are lucky. Okay. Some of us were lucky not to experience the mother wound. So this is why I said the collective and the, cosmic. So when this idea comes that the wound is where the light enters, like something that hurts you, if it doesn't kill you, but we don't want to get into that kind of, extreme. We don't want to wound in order to heal. We don't have to actually go and wound somebody, but we have to shake people. We have to shake people from the complacency. Some people, again, I'm not this, there are people who are ready, ripe. Ripeness is all. I love Shakespeare's line. Ripeness means, and I think collectively, that's why we are even having this dialogue. For a very long time, I used to think, hey, I have a PhD in English. Why am I doing all this? Why am I writing? Because the call of the mother, if something else in the universe is calling some people to speak of this internal truth, the inner truth, right? The balancing of inner and the outer. Masculine and feminine, these are just, we put these genders, and because gender politics has, hey, listen, when you are trying to enter the world of this power, right, these things are inevitable. So women who are there reacting, they get very angry. My God, the extreme politics on American campuses where these women are so intolerant, or this is identity politics of the worst kind, right? You will not let anybody else speak. This extreme misandry or extreme, whether it is, or even black politics or white politics, it's like, I will not let anybody else speak because you are so oppressive. You are, so this oppression, oppressor oppressed dynamic is also part of that polarity that has to be dissolved. We cannot do that by making the laws will create, okay, so let's just at least recognize, Black Lives Matter. Let's recognize that women have been oppressed in certain ways, not in every other way. From my gynocentric perspective, this is why I said having my black female mother gave me a strange power. It was not about power over others, right? It was a power, something. So even this idea of empowerment can mean Shakti path. That means like descent of the power. That is actually most beautiful power. Not, so this is where I like the mother-child dynamic rather than the master-slave dynamic that has become this very, kind of key thing. So this is why I began with must acknowledge the wound, okay? Must acknowledge the trauma. Gabor Mate is absolutely brilliant talking about that. So addiction, why are we addicted to? And not just addicted to drugs, to shopping, to talking, to all kinds of stuff, because we want to hide that pain, right? So we must acknowledge that this is why I said dukkha, right? First noble truth. Dukkha, discontent, pain, acknowledge the pain. When we acknowledge the pain and we make friends with sex, greed, and anger. This is the trickiest thing that only Tantra does and all esoteric paths do. Right now, I'm working on Mary Magdalene. I'm my third book, hopefully someday. Think what happened to Mary Magdalene, right? In the whole history of certain aspect of Christianity. So in order to really claim that, so we realize sexuality is not evil, okay? Anger is not evil. Greed is not evil. These are energies, okay? We make friends with them. Tantra has amazing yogic tantra, yoga tantra I'm talking about this time. And then people come to these things at different stages. So it's not like it's one size fits all. So you recognize this. This has happened to me. Then you cleanse. See, the word moksha literally means cleansing, right? Each element in your body, or chakras and these things, these are basically our emotions, our sense of security, our sense of, all of these things have to be seen as they arise in us. And then we let them go. So in order to yoga, see this primal trauma of separation, right? It is this illusion that we exist separately. We cannot exist separately. It's just impossible. Nothing can, this is called dependent origination by Buddha. This is why I gave the last image of the spider web or Indra's net. Like every one of us reflects the entire cosmos. But we have to recognize that you can't have a theory in your head, right? A lot of the spiritual practices are also theories in the head, bringing ourselves into the embodied understanding, bringing ourselves. By the way, this is where the terminology, the Shaivites will focus more on the Shiva aspect, and they will, again, unconsciously valorize more Shiva. Shaktas, they are valorize more Shakti, right? I like to use that you have to dissolve both of them, because my Vajra Yoga practices, that is pragya that has to awaken. It's the wisdom that has to awaken. Wisdom is the wisdom of this entire universe that is sparkling with this divine. I mean, what does the word divine mean? The root of the word divine is also playful. It's also something that is expressing itself, right? And that's all of us. It's not some entity out there, over there controlling things. That's the control mechanism, God, right? So positive thing is happening. The very fact that we are together here, 15 of us having this conversation, but then there is hard work. And splendid isolation is very easy. You can try that, and a lot of these spiritual teachers will teach you all sorts of stuff. And yeah, why go through all this shit? Sorry. Just sit there and do your whatever in your little world, and then not deal with the things that are very painful. It takes years and years, but that doesn't mean. Now see, since Kali eats time, right? In my case, my Shiddama was an amazing woman master. Nobody knows about her beyond her village. I write about her, so people know who gave me this crazy experience, and I was like, what happened to me? But then it has taken like 40, 50, 60 years, and I'm still integrating. Nilima knows the difficulties. At every step, people will say, you are stupid, you are dumb, you're doing something crazy, it makes no sense. But you can't help it. Once you're called to this, you are just going to do it no matter what. And then some people, I never believed that my course on the goddess and world religions will become so popular with young American girls. It was young American girls who thought that they are the most empowered in the world. They were the ones who were suffering from body image, this and that, because of the devaluation of the feminine. In India, the other thing, complete opposite thing also happens in India. We think we have the mother goddess, right? We go put flower on her feet, which is a good thing to do. At least, I mean, Western theologians tell me at least you have symbols of the divine mother. But that's not enough. But there's wonderful opportunities. There are great teachers speaking through these amazing machines. We don't have to say all those things were bad. Part of our human experimentation, expansion of knowledge, right? But we just don't want to turn these machines into masters. They're great tools. We use them, but we do our personal work. There is no escaping that.
So thank you. I know some of us have to leave, but this was just fabulous, Neela. And I loved how you wove in the closing that the wound is where the light comes in and comes out of as well. So to go deeper into it, to embrace sex and anger and greed and to accept them and then to understand them until they can dissolve and move on as all other energy of life does. And then we kind of break through to this ground beyond the polarity of right and wrong, and we arrive in that ground of pragya, which is the ultimate aim of the yoga that will heal the illusion of separation.
Right,
So,
right.
and then to see it all as a game of hide and seek, right? That
Yep.
we played the game of separation so that we could find our oneness again and enjoy it all over again. So,
Beautiful, beautiful. Yeah, you got that. Leela.
yeah.
Yeah.
So thank you so much. It's been wonderful having all these lovely women on the call. And well, Neela is one of our 64 yoginis, and many of you are as well. So the conversation continues. This was cast on the Truth and Reconciliation Facebook page. So you can always revisit there and feel free to leave questions there. And, how can I keep in touch? Mayuri is asking. Be in touch with us on the Truth and Reconciliation Facebook group or the Facebook page. Truth and Reconciliation Resources
Right.
is the group. And
And you can send me emails if you want. I am putting that in chat. If you want to, those of you who want to send me any messages, feel free to do that. And I'm also on Facebook. So
super. Thank you so much for sharing your email ID. So with that, should we close with the Om Shanti since it's
yes,
in
you lead that, Nilima. Thank you so much for to all of you for this great conversation. Thank you.
super, super. So let's just imagine this beautiful net of the Divine Mother and stepping into our unique node in that net, knowing that we are a fractal of the whole and the whole is in us as well. And let us know the peace of that wholeness as we chant Om Shanti, placing ourselves in the eternity of time and the infinity of space. Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. May peace descend into every cell of our bodies. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Be well, all of you.
Be well, everyone. Bye now.